Okay, welcome back to the Nick and Joe Show, folks. I'm Nick, he's Joe, and we had a great first hour. We're going to be doing all kinds of more fun stuff coming up. I don't know how to kick this segment off, Joe.
Well, okay, so here we are, end of the year 2020.
Yeah, we got to talk about.
Yeah, we just figured that we have to spend some time talking about the year that's just passed, a year in review, for want of a better way of expressing it. So we just thought, okay, what are the top stories of this year? And to make the exercise a little bit more interesting, okay, I made a rule. I pulled rank, if not weight, and I exercised executive privilege, and only because I control the mics here in the Think Radio Broadcast Center while we're on the air. And so whenever there's a problem with mics, it's my fault. Okay, got that, Rod Phillips? That's what happens when you admit that you're doing something wrong.
You have to own it.
And in my case, most of the time it's a mistake. Most of the time. I normally don't purposely cut Nick off.
No. At least that's what he tells people when the mics are on.
That's it. It's actually, the truth is, there have been times when I've had to turn I've had to turn Nick's mic off because he's so angry, especially when he's broadcasting remotely, when he's coming onto the show from the farm or whatever, and he's just using his laptop, and he gets so angry sometimes that he's just pounding that laptop. So this is what happens sometimes, is I just mute Nick's feed because the typing is just too distracting for our listeners. And then, now I do that. Now, listening, Rod Phillips, I do that on purpose. And I don't think it's bad judgment, but when I forget to turn the mic back on, the feed back on, that's an accident. That is a mistake. And I still own it. Okay.
He does a good job of it, too.
Anyway, it doesn't happen often. Look, so here is the rule that I sort of put in, because I thought this would be really interesting. The top stories in our minds, Nick, without referring to the pandemic or the U.S. presidential election. Because everybody would list one, if not both of those, as the top stories.
And for very good reasons.
In whatever order, okay?
Right.
So basically what I'm saying is, okay, so if those are the obvious two top stories, then what's the third story in your mind? And what are some of the runners-up? And I have a few here from myself. But so that's kind of the game. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I see how it's got kind of quiet in the chat room, but feel free to pipe in with your own suggestions, ideas that you have. We'll read them out. And if you're listening and you're not in the chat room and you want to know how to do that, if you're listening to the live show, click on the chat bubble in the player, and it'll take you to a separate page where if you may have to register, you may have to log in. If you have to do either of those things, go ahead and do it. It's just to make sure that you are a flesh and blood human being, not a robot. And we don't use that data for any reason. It's other than that, just to make sure that you're a live person.
We don't look, we don't peek, we don't do nothing.
We don't care. We just want to hear what you have. We want to read, not hear. We want to read what you have to write in the chat room. Now, I wanted to be grammatically correct.
You know what's funny is I just this minute clicked on Twitter, and you know what's breaking on Twitter right now?
Okay, please. It's not a Donald Trump story, is it?
No, it's not.
And is it a pandemic story?
We'll give this just as a breaking news story for those who may not have heard it yet. Doug Ford now admits he knew about Philip's trip 2 weeks ago.
Okay, you see, I read that already.
You did read that.
I didn't read it on Twitter. I read it in my news feed. I wasn't sure what to make of that. I didn't read the 2 weeks thing. But if he knew about the trip, goodness, what did he do? Did he approve it? 2 weeks ago, because Phillips didn't go down on vacation 2 weeks ago. As far as I know. I mean, maybe he's been away for 2 weeks already. See, that is.
Here's the quote that's in the Spencer. You familiar with Spencer Fernando?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Okay, that's where the source is. That's where the information is coming from.
You mean he tweeted?
He tweeted this out. Okay, and this is the tweet he's talking about that Ford made. I did call him shortly after he arrived, and I talked to him and asked him where he was. He said he was away. My mistake. I take full responsibility. At the time, I should have said, get your backside back to Ontario, and I did not do that. That's Ford talking. That's quite different from what Ford said yesterday. This means that Ford wasn't actually angry. He's simply trying to play damage control and put on a show of outrage in hopes he won't take any heat. Anyway, so that's the latest on that story.
Okay, so just a very, very quick recap for anyone who hasn't. If you're listening to the podcast, you may not have heard us talking about this in the live show earlier, but this is just pertaining to Rod Phillips, who is the finance minister in the Ontario government. The Ontario government imposed a province-wide lockdown starting on Boxing Day, and then it was discovered that Rod Phillips, who is the finance minister, was ignoring the lockdown and had flown to
the Caribbean
on a vacation over the holiday season. And so we had some fun on that in a previous segment, so you can go back and listen to that if you want more details on it. So that's breaking news. I don't know if that qualifies as one of the top stories.
I just want to bring bring it to people's attention, because this is what undermines people's confidence in their governments. Anyway, having said that, I can dump that now. I forget even why I went to Twitter.
Oh my goodness. I do have to say this, since we're talking about breaking news, Nick.
Yeah.
So I don't know where the ad came from, but I got this ad that I saw on YouTube, and it's called the Tushy Spa. It's a portable bidet. Okay, for those of you who don't know that. A portable, yeah. You can install it on your toilet seat, and that's how you clean yourself after doing your business. So I clicked on this thinking, okay, what the heck is this? Watched one video of it, and now every second ad that pops up on my news feeds and everything is for this Tushy Spa.
Oh God!
And on YouTube,
I am so glad you warned me.
It just popped up. Okay, here it is. $109. Okay,
$109 for some machine to wash your butt.
That's it.
Oh,
and they have some really. I got to tell you, they have some interesting commercials about this on YouTube.
I'll bet they do.
They do. I mean, how do you advertise it?
And then they talk about community standards. They've got the gall to talk about community standards.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the free association part of our show. This is why our listeners like us so much, is because they never know what our wild and crazy minds are going to go to when we start free associating.
Hey, listen, you went there on your own. You dragged me kicking and screaming.
Kicking and screaming. Okay, don't start coughing there, Nick.
Oh,
all right.
Man.
Okay. Seriously, what are some of the runner-up stories for you, Nick, for this year?
Okay. Well, I got you. You kind of laid the table for me in the last segment when we were talking about innovation and that kind of thing. I think that one of the most underreported stories, or misunderstood, or just stories that didn't get the credit they were due, has to be Elon Musk and his attempts to get to Mars. Now, yes, Elon Musk is not exactly what you call the most, I don't want to say
conventional person?
Thank you. That'll work. Conventional person. He looks at the world through slightly different lenses than the rest of us do, which I don't necessarily fault him for. He was trying to re-land a rocket after... so they're reusable. The idea is, do you remember the old Buck Rogers from the 1930s? You ever see those old black and white ones?
Yeah.
The rockets all landed on their tail, and nobody could figure out how they did it, right? Well, let's face it, the science in Buck Rogers was a little imaginative. Didn't follow too much the laws of physics and so on. Anyway, he's trying to land his ship the same way. And the thing, as it comes down, it lands improperly and explodes. But he says, hey, we got 2 out of 3 objectives done. That's great. It tells me 2 things. Money's not an option, not an issue with this guy. And the other thing is, he has a different way of looking at things, because everybody on any other space program would have gone, oh, a disaster. Oh, my God. So I think that the whole idea of a private venture, and I kind of like, I understand your point of view about Calvin Coolidge mentality when it comes to how nations develop visions and so on. I get that, and I agree with it. And I was saying that it does take, though, leaders at the right times. Take Winston Churchill, take Ronald Reagan, take Margaret Thatcher, take whoever you want to point us in the right direction, and then let us go. Okay, so we've got a direction to follow. This takes Reagan and Star Wars and so on. But Elon Musk, he's a bit of a wild card. I have no idea how he pronounces it, but his child, who he married a Canadian woman, and she gave birth to a boy. I think it was a boy.
We can't tell.
Not by the name, you can't. No. So anyway, gave birth to a child, and they named it some machination of the English alphabet, and nobody knows how it's said. But it's his kind of vision. It's his ability to think outside the box that makes him probably one of the most creative inventors in the last 70 or 80 years. And you can say that, okay, yeah, he's a little off the wall, but so was Alexander Mackenzie King. So was Tesla. So there's a lot of these inventors, a lot of these creators weren't exactly of sound mind until and unless they were creating. And that's true of writers, of poets, of musicians, of inventors. Look at the guy who wrote Alice in Wonderland. The guy was on heroin. Was it I think it was heroin or opium. I forget. But some mind-altering drug. And he wrote a classic. I mean...
Yeah, I don't know that he was, but anyway.
He was an addict, at least, if he wasn't on it at the time. But I'm pretty sure whoever wrote it was addicted to some kind of heavy, big-time drugs. I'm going to say it was heroin. I'm probably wrong. But all these people...
I'm only going to step in because I'm going to defend him.
Go ahead.
It was Lewis Carroll. Somehow or other, I can't see Lewis Carroll being a heavy drug user.
Well, Google was the author of Alice in Wonderland on drugs when he wrote it. See what comes up.
Okay.
We'll let Google you do our work for us here.
Okay, keep going, Nick.
So anyway, the point I'm making is that creativity is often there's a very, very fine line between genius and madness. And I think that Elon Musk is walking that line. And it's people like him who propel us. Like, look at Columbus. Okay, now he had his own reasons for trying to find a shortcut to the Far East by traveling west. But at the same time, to get on a boat the size of the Santa Maria or the Pinta, or I forget what the third one was, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, and it'll come to me later. But he gets on these 3 little